I kind of feel like PC gaming is in its golden age. You can just play absolutely everything on PC. You can play PlayStation games, you can play Xbox games, and technically, even though Nintendo doesn't want you to know this, there are ways to play Nintendo games as well. But we're not going to talk about all that today. Rather, we're going to talk about JRPGs. There was a point in time where there weren't a lot of JRPGs on a PC platform. But you know what? Times have changed in a major way. Japanese studios are now fully committed to the PC race, and they are booming on the platform. Not only that, but I also believe that this is one of the best genres to play on the Steam Deck. I've always really enjoyed a good JRPG on a handheld device. So, again, this really is just the golden age for PC gaming. So, what I'm going to do today with this ever-growing library of JRPGs and games that are inspired by them is that we're going to look at the 25 best games within this genre that you can play on PC. And most of them do run very well on a Steam Deck, outside of maybe a few. If you want some extra information for an individual Steam Deck game, visit ProtonDB.com. It does a fantastic job where people can list their experience for each individual game. Now, with that said, do keep in mind that this list is only my opinion. I know some people get mad about opinions, but if I miss one of your favorites, let me know in the comments below. But other than that, let's just go and get right into it. Number 25, and to start off this list, I'm going to go with Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, which is a really interesting JRPG. I think in a lot of ways, it might not necessarily be what you expect from this genre. Its story is fun, but it's not necessarily a major emphasis either, and you can complete its main quest in about 10 or so hours. Now, there's still a lot of other things that you can do in the end game, however, and that's where I think Grand Blue really separates itself. It's often compared to the Monster Hunter series in the sense that you're constantly grinding and progressing, but instead of leveling up weapons, you'll level up characters, all of which have completely unique combat styles. So, you can honestly put a ton of time into Grand Blue, and if you like hack and slash games that can offer a challenge at times, then I'd say Grand Blue is definitely worth a try, and plus, it's a very good-looking game at that. I really, really like its art style. Number 24, Cassette Beast. Now, I know there's been a lot of Pokemon likes over the years, or at least that's what every monster taming game kind of gets compared to, but Cassette Beast is one that I think really stands out. Yes, it is a monster taming game in essence, but with a completely different twist. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit more of the Digimon series than anything else. You're kind of whisked away to this unknown parallel world where you have to uncover its mysteries by capturing and battling monsters. You can choose your own evolution path, and there's even fusions as well. Again, kind of reminds me of Digimon. But what I'll kind of say about this game is that it's got fantastic music, I really enjoy its double battles, and I think it's just different enough to stand out. This very well might be one of the best attempts at this genre that I've personally seen, and its quality really surprised me. Number 23, Sea of Stars. Now, every once in a while we get a game that as soon as you see it, you just kind of know that it's going to be special. And that's the feeling that you get when you see Sea of Stars. This game is just outright beautiful in every sense of the word. Its animations, its art style, the music, just everything was handled with a lot of care. But even beyond just its visuals, there's so much more to this game. At first glance, you might recognize its Chrono Trigger inspiration, and that alone I'd say is already exciting enough as is. But it also draws a lot of inspiration from the classic Mario RPG games, where you time different button presses to strengthen your attacks and defense. In my opinion, this element adds an extra layer to its combat, it makes it a little bit more engaging, and keeps you on your toes. It also has a fun coming-of-age story with a well-realized world. Number 22, Grandia HD. One thing about old JRPGs is that they have aged incredibly well, thanks to their timeless art style, and I think Grandia HD is a prime example of this. Though, I will say that it is quite a bit different than other retro JRPGs. It kind of does its own thing. It's got a really upbeat art style with a 3D camera, and that's really unique for this type of game. It also has a fun coming-of-age story, which is mainly enjoyable because the characters are just so charming. And it even has an interesting combat system. Positioning on a battlefield is actually very important in this game, and again, I just think that Grandia is kind of its own thing. If you're in the mood for an old-school, classic RPG that's maybe a little bit different, then Grandia HD, I think, is worth a try. Number 21, Monster Hunter Stories 1 and 2. Now, if you would have told me a combination of Pokemon and Monster Hunter was a good idea, I'm not sure I would have exactly believed you. Like, that just sounds absolutely bizarre to me. But that's kind of what Capcom did for Monster Hunter Stories, and dare I say, they pulled it off incredibly well. These are turn-based JRPGs where you befriend, train, and battle monsters within the Monster Hunter series. Though I will say, if you're worried about this, you don't necessarily need to have experience with the Monster Hunter franchise to enjoy these games. These can be played as standalone titles with no prior knowledge of the series. And that's kind of the thing here, because unlike the mainline games, you're not a monster hunter looking to kill everything that you see, but instead, you're a monster rider who befriends monsters that will fight alongside you. It's a well-done twist, and while I think Monster Hunter fans will maybe appreciate this world and universe just a little bit more, again, whether you like the series or not, these are good, solid-based JRPGs that really any fan of the genre can enjoy. Number 20, Legend of Heroes Trails in the Sky Trilogy. When it comes to some of the all-time great JRPGs, one series that often gets a little bit overlooked is Legend of Heroes, especially the Trails in the Sky trilogy. Now, these games are originally made for the PSP, but the PC ports are done very well. I think these are great fits for the platform, but if I had to compare them to anything, I would kind of explain them as a fantasy epic novel series. And what I mean by that is that they can be slow burns, but they're completely worth it for the grand adventure if you're willing to invest the time. But yes, they're very story-driven games with great characters, and I do like their turn-based combat as well. Number 19, Valkyrie Chronicles Bundle. Valkyrie Chronicles is probably one of the more unique games on this list, with not only its cel-shaded art style, but especially the combat that truly sets it apart from other games. It's kind of a tactics turn-based RPG, but with its own unique spin. You actually have to navigate a 3D world zone like Battlefield, and it's extremely strategic, as you would expect from other games within this genre. So even though it's technically a JRPG, there's really no other game like it, and that means that your enjoyment might depend on if you connect with its different form of playstyle, but it also does have a really good story as well. So if you like engaging stories, and if you want to try something just a little bit different, then Valkyrie Chronicles 1 and 4 are definitely worth a try. Number 18, Disgaea 4. Now, if Valkyrie Chronicles is one of the most unique tactic-based JRPGs, well, then I'd say Disgaea is probably one of the most odd within this genre that you're going to come across. They're mostly lighthearted stories about demons, and they never really take themselves overly serious. They're almost always goofy, and they just know how to have a good time. You really do come to love their characters and all of their different quirks. Now, like I said, though, these are tactical RPGs, and they have a lot of depth to their combat systems. You can use your partners in all kinds of different ways. You can throw them across the screen. You can do team attacks, and the leveling up in these games just get to astronomical, insane levels. And while I can mostly recommend all of the Disgaea games, my personal favorite in the series is Disgaea 4. Number 17, Chained Echoes. Now, this is a Super Nintendo-inspired turn-based JRPG that ultimately tries to do its own thing, and I think it does so brilliantly. First off, there's no random encounters in this game, and its entire combat system is based on an overdrive mechanic, where you try to balance out all of your attacks to stay within a certain parameter. If you go above a specific range because maybe you're only doing super powerful attacks, well, then you might take more damage. So they really encourage you to approach the combat strategically instead of just doing the same thing over and over again, like you do in maybe some other games within this genre. Personally, I really like this system, and I think it makes the game much more engaging. And I also think that this innovation really separates Chained Echoes from other games. Yes, it's familiar, but it's also different at the same time. It also has a really good epic story, and there's plenty of playable characters to mix and match your teams with. I mean, if anything else here, I'd say that Chained Echoes is quietly one of the better modern, albeit retro-style JRPGs. Number 16, Ni no Kuni. Now, Ni no Kuni very well might be one of the most beautiful games ever made, thanks to its Studio Ghibli art style brought to life. In fact, Studio Ghibli actually helped out with this game, and the combination of them plus Level 5 just kind of cultivated this instant classic. Just like a lot of Studio Ghibli movies, it has such a heart-wrenching, relatable story with characters that you really want to root for, and the world itself just kind of sucks you into its universe. Now, in terms of combat, though, it's technically a monster taming game. You capture, you battle, and you evolve. Familiars is what they call them. They're just monsters. But unlike a lot of other monster taming games, its combat system is set in real time. So it's a very different style of monster taming game, if anything else. I think the best way I can describe Ni no Kuni is that it's an instant classic that I think will easily stand the test of time. Number 15, Bravely Default 2. Now, the Bravely Default franchise is easily among my favorite turn-based games ever made, and that's mainly because of its brilliant, just brilliant combat system. While I don't think Bravely Default reaches the same pinnacle as its predecessor, it however still has one of the best combat systems that the genre has to offer. It's a series that takes a lot of inspiration from the classic Final Fantasy IV, in the sense that jobs are a big emphasis, and there's just a ton of strategy as you mix and match different jobs for individual characters. It can actually be a very challenging game at times, and I absolutely love that for this game, because it'll truly put your skills to the test and see just how well you can strategize. So if you're looking for a great turn-based game with a good combat system, I firmly believe that there's not many games out there that does it better than Bravely Default 2. Number 14, Neo: The World Ends With You. It is actually extremely disappointing to me that this series has somehow gone overlooked not once, but twice. First with The World Ends With You on the DS, and now with its sequel as well. What I'll kind of say here, though, is that it's a very unique action JRPG with a lot of atmosphere and a lot of style. In my opinion, I think it's a standout game for a multitude of reasons. One is its mysterious world and story. You find yourself in a parallel world where you have to play something called the Reaper's Game. If you win the game, you'll be able to return back to your own world alive and well, but if you lose, then you and your team will die. Personally, I think this high-stakes story is amazing with some really interesting characters that you truly care about. It also has, I'd say, a rather fun combat system. Now, I'm not going to say that it's overly complex per se, but there's a lot of mix and match fighting styles that you can utilize because you collect various attacks that you can equip and level up. Really, I think the only problem with this game on Steam, and it's the only reason that I don't have it higher on this list, because it's honestly one of my favorites, but the problem here is that Steam doesn't have the first game, and that story is important to get the fullest out of the sequel. I mean, I still think that you can play Neo: The World Ends With You as a standalone title, but it is something to maybe keep in mind. Number 13, HD 2D remakes. Now, one thing that I've really enjoyed about this generation is the return of classic JRPGs with that beautiful, beautiful 2D HD art style. It's just such a brilliant way of bringing one of the most timeless art styles to the modern era in a new way, and they really just pop off screen. Another thing about these games, though, is that it also gives us an opportunity to play some of these games that were once overlooked, like Live Alive HD and Star Ocean Second Story R. Both of these are remakes that a lot of people previously missed out on, and in fact, Live Alive was previously only released over in Japan. So I am thrilled that it got a remake, though I will say, even though I grouped these together, both of these are very different games. I really just kind of wanted to combine them. That way I can highlight even more games for you all. That's really what these lists are all about. But Live Alive is one of the most unique games for this genre. It tells 8 different stories, and its gameplay completely changes character to character. But I just love how they connect together, and I think once it does, it's just a brilliant game. Whereas Star Ocean Second Story R, this is more of an action RPG, and I've never really seen a game look quite like it. I mean, we've gotten various HD 2D games, but none of them looks like Star Ocean Second Story R. It really is a beautiful game. It ties in a good story with fun combat. It really is the entire package, and I think these are easy recommends for the genre. Number 12, Shin Megami Tensei 5, Vengeance. One of the most amazing PC inclusions these past few years has been Atlas. After years of just strange and just bewildering platform exclusivity, they've finally decided to be smart about their business, which includes the PC platform. Probably should have done this years ago, but hey, Who's counting here? But yes, this even includes the upcoming Metaphor ReFantazio, which I'm hoping is as good as it looks. But for now, you can already play Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance. This is the definitive version for the prior Nintendo Switch exclusive, and it's easily one of the better and more in-depth JRPGs that you can play. More or less, it's a monster taming game set in a desolate demon world. You can join parties with different demons that you come across, and I think that there is the bread and butter for this game. It's combat. Now, in terms of story, I mean, I think there's much better games in this list for something like that, but when it comes to its combat, if you want something to put your skills to the test, then I'd say that Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance is a good game to play. Number 11, Tales of Vesperia and Tales of Arise. So yeah, the Tales of series holds a very special place in my heart, and that's in large part because of Tales of Vesperia. Vesperia is actually one of my favorite stories in all of JRPGs. I just love the characters in this game so much. They have great chemistry together, though I do want to go ahead and highlight Tales of Arise as well. This game is also very good. It is the newest entry, and it's a huge step up in terms of production value. It is a true AAA JRPG. It's gorgeous to look at, and I think it has a really good story as well. You play as a slave that feels no pain, and he meets this more privileged person that can't touch anybody because all she does is cause pain. So they turn into this yin and yang type of duo, and it's just fun to see how it all plays out. Whether you play Tales of Vesperia, though, or Tales of Arise, there's really no wrong choice here. They're both just absolutely fantastic. Number 10, Octopath Traveler 2. Now, we talked about HD 2D games earlier, and that was all popularized by Octopath Traveler. This is a completely new, modernized JRPG that takes inspiration from games like Final Fantasy VI. And while I think the first Octopath Traveler was good, I think its sequel just turned up everything to 11. It is such an improved game and really just kind of goes down as one of the best JRPGs that's been made in recent years. I think both in terms of its combat and because of its story. You have 8 different characters with their own unique motives and stories. You can kind of play through any story at any time at your own pace. And while obviously, yes, some stories will be better than others, it eventually does become a more cohesive experience that feels very rewarding. It also has excellent combat, and I just think this is one of the better modern takes for JRPGs. Number 9, Dragon Quest XI. In many ways, you can kind of say that Dragon Quest is the godfather for this genre, and throughout its history, it's mostly stuck with the status quo in the best possible way. Dragon Quest XI plays out like an old-school, turn-based RPG that came straight out of the 90s, and I do say that in a good way. You know, there's a reason that some fans believe to this day that the 90s was the golden age for JRPGs. They're really just that good, and in the case of Dragon Quest XI, it takes that traditional old-school experience where you go on a grand adventure with a party of memorable characters. It has a fantastic story, it has the timeless Toriyama art style, it's got fun turn-based combat, and even with its sound effects, they kept it very similar to the older games. So if you do miss those 90s JRPGs, then Dragon Quest XI is an excellent, albeit more retro style game to jump into. Number 8, Omori. So, okay, technically, yes, Omori isn't necessarily a JRPG in the sense that it is a Japanese-developed game. But it does draw a lot of inspiration from games like the Mother series, and you'll see that specifically with its turn-based combat. In my opinion, though, I think this really is one of the best and most unique turn-based RPGs that's released in recent years, so I just had to include it, and right away, you can kind of see just how unique this game is in its presentation alone. It sports this self-drawn, pencil-like art style that leaves quite an impression, and that really is with just every aspect for this game. You quickly kind of realize that Omori is a special game and how emotionally invested that it can make you. I don't want to give too much away about the story of this game because I think it's really the best to go in blind. But what I'll say here is that Omori is a deeply unsettling, albeit brilliant experience. Its cast of characters are very likable. I think they're some of the most realized characters in video games, and they're very easy to relate to. But it does dive into darker topics, so you might want to go ahead and prepare for that. but I can easily say that Omori is one of the most memorable and, in my opinion, just special experiences on this list. Number 7, Bug Fables. Now, Bug Fables is another game that clearly wears its inspiration on its sleeves, but I mean, I tell you what, it doesn't live in anybody's shadow, and in this case, that's Paper Mario. It takes a lot of elements from that series and just absolutely runs with it. And in some cases, you can debatably say that it might do some things better. Of course, you have those interactive turn-based battles, you can solve puzzles throughout this world, and it's just brimming with a ton of personality. There, however, are a few things that really surprise me about Bug Fable. If you set its difficulty to hard, it's actually challenging enough to have some real depth. And then on top of that, I think the story is very well told. It's got really likable characters, and just like the Paper Mario series, it's really a joy to play from beginning to end. So for somebody like me who's been begging Nintendo to go back and make a more traditional Paper Mario game, come on Nintendo, let's make it happen. But yeah, Bug Fables might not be it in name, but again, it gives you a similar experience all while doing its own thing. It's not just a shameless carbon copy and nothing else. If anything, it can sit side by side with Paper Mario and feel proud to be near the same quality. Number 6, Chrono Trigger. I mean, there's no way that you can make a JRPG list without the inclusion of Chrono Trigger. It's easily among the best within this genre, and you can even make an argument that it's among the best games ever made. What's kind of hard to believe about that, though, is that Chrono Trigger, for whatever reason, is not available on any other modern platform. It's just available on PC. So kind of an interesting situation with all that. But yeah, Chrono Trigger was originally released in 1995, and even all these years later, it's still just as amazing as it ever was. It has beautiful pixel art designed by Toriyama, most well known for his work on Dragon Ball, rest in peace. And it just has amazing characters with a fun story. The story centers around time travel after accidentally creating a time rift that sends a girl back in time, and from this point forward, it's our job to travel back in time to rescue her. Though, of course, as many time travel stories goes, that's a little bit easier said than done. It really is a well-told story, though, that has multiple endings, and the combat is really special as well. I feel like it was just so ahead of its time in certain ways. But if you haven't already played this game for whatever reason, I mean, just kind of believe in the hype because it's 100% real. Number 5, Yakuza. Okay, so the Yakuza series is kind of a unique situation for JRPGs, and the reason I say that is because this is a long-running series with 9 mainline titles, and for the most part, I would classify them as a beat-em-up series with some RPG elements. However, in the 2 newest games, Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, they shifted over to being a more traditional turn-based JRPG, and somehow they knocked it out of the park. It actually works extremely well. And what I can say about this series is that they are legitimately some of the best story-driven games ever made. The only thing is, though, even though I can't say they're all JRPGs, I'd still honestly recommend this entire series, Yakuza 0 through 6 and the 2 newest games. It's a big time investment, but it's 100% worth it if you're looking for a good story. They have so many twists along the way, and they're just going to keep you on the edge of your seat. Number 4, Kingdom Hearts. It's honestly hard to believe that it took Square Enix this long to port these games over to Steam. But you know what? Here we are, and if I had explained the series in one single word, I would say that they're magical. Now, if I added another word, I would also say that they're convoluted. Its story can be absolutely all over the place at times because every single game is important in some shape or form. But you know what? I honestly think that it's worth it. Yes, it's a time sink. There's no doubt about that. It requires a long time investment. But I think when all is said and done, I'd say that this is one of the more memorable gaming franchises out there. I think in a lot of ways, it's a special experience that always keeps you hooked. And I think especially for the mainline titles. They're a lot of fun, they have great worlds with Disney being a centerpiece. I like the main characters and its overarching story, and I also think that it has one of the best soundtracks in all of gaming. So if you haven't already played these games, or if you want to play through them to prepare for the eventual Kingdom Hearts 4, absolutely do so. Number 3, Nier Replicant and Nier Automata. Oh man, these games are flat out masterpieces. And I truly do mean that. The first time I ever played Nier Automata, I just kind of thought to myself, this game is so weird. But the more I played it, the more hooked I became. It has this fascinating setting and a really unique story that takes course over various playthroughs. And that's something that I really need to emphasize about these games. These are not the type of games that ends when you see their credits. It's honestly just kind of the beginning, and you should play through these multiple times, at least 3 times, and after that, you'll just kind of be blown away. It's an amazing and unique way of telling a story, and even though I do prefer Automata, I still want to highlight Nier Replicant as well. Both of these games are top tier in every facet, and in my opinion, I really just think they're some of the best games of all time, and that goes beyond just their stories. They have amazing music, they have great worlds, interesting characters, and the action style of gameplay is a lot of fun. I think both of these games are must-play experiences. Number 2, the Persona series. True story. Persona 4 Golden on the PlayStation Vita was actually the game that truly made me appreciate this genre more than I ever did before. And in fact, since then, it's really been one of my favorite genres by far. So it should go without saying that Persona 4 Golden holds a very special place in my heart. Persona 4 is still one of my favorite games of all time because I just love the characters, I love its mysterious story, and even its atmospheric setting where it's located in this small town. It really does a good job at absorbing you into its universe. At the same time, though, it's really just one of those franchises that's so consistently top of its class that any one of the mainline entries can be viewed as the best. So whether you play Persona 3 Reload, Persona 4 Golden, or the highly popular Persona 5, they're really all amazing experiences in their own way, and they're so incredibly easy to recommend. If you haven't played these games before, though, the way they work is that you play as a high school student who can travel to a parallel world filled with demons. So it's kind of split into 2 different types of games. One is a monster taming dungeon crawler where you collect and battle demons, and then during the daytime you are just kind of this everyday student. So there is this social sim element where you have to manage your time and form different bonds with different characters. It actually mixes very well together, and again, all 3 of these games are must-plays for fans of JRPGs. And okay, here we are at the number 1 spot, and I have to go with the Final Fantasy series. And just like Persona, I can't simply recommend one single game. Every Final Fantasy game is unique in their own way, and they're consistently top of their class. Whether that be the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, the old classics like 7, 8, or 9, or even the modern games like 7 and 16. They're really all just so good in their own ways, and yeah, I mean, I could have spread out single entries throughout this list, but my main goal when it comes to these type of videos is to highlight as many great games as I possibly can. That way you can discover something that you'll hopefully enjoy as well. But what I'll kind of do here is I'll tell you about my favorite Final Fantasy games. Now right away, Final Fantasy VII is my absolute favorite, and that goes for both the classic as well as the remake. These are actually some of my favorite games of all time. Now, the remake does expand more on the characters, which I really love, but one recommendation that I have is to do a modded version of the original Final Fantasy VII. You can upgrade its visuals, and you can even add a voice acting mod, which really transforms that game. It's pretty easy to do, and it's also pretty amazing stuff. You can also do that with 8 and 9 as well if you want, and for that matter, my other 2 favorite Final Fantasy games is actually Final Fantasy 8 and 16. 8 is probably the most polarizing game just because the main character is, yes, kind of a jerk at times, but I really enjoyed its story overall and its setting, and then I just absolutely adore 16's story. Probably one of my favorite stories in the series, and I really enjoyed its more mature tone. The only thing about that game, I'll say, is that it's much more action-driven than what some fans wanted, but I still thought it was really fun, just like the rest of the series. I mean, there's a reason that Final Fantasy has inspired countless, and I mean absolutely countless games that's come after. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this list. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, do let me hear about your favorite games as well in the comments below. But other than that, go ahead and subscribe if you like this type of content. I do have plenty more videos like this planned for the future. But until next time, peace out.